Loron diak ba malu karena insirne be orasnya asisti hela programa live streaming ba edição no hinian. Maluk sira ami hakarak relata ba itu bot sira kata ko hin Timor-Leste sayumanain ba encontro reunião interministerial organização de setimais nian nebe halau ia centro convenção dili. Encontro interministerial ba ohinian ia âmbito comemoração tinan sanuluresin 5 existência organização ia tinang rihun rua sanul liuba honia tema maka tinan sanulu resin 5 ia unidade nian forma ia futuro ho paz ia resiliência ia nação de setimais nian maluk sira objetivo seluk maka hanesa itu atene kata Timor-Leste maka saya hanesa nação fundador doador inspirador ba existência organização de setimais ne ia tinan sanulu resin 5 liba objetivo seluk maka ia encontro interministerial ohinian maka atu halo revisão kono ba progresso no alcance nebe atingiona durante tinan sanulu resin 5 objetivo selukida maka se consolida a nível ministerial tanto diversidade husi membros de setimais ne tem que consolida dia cliutan e kusliu maka atu traça estratégia ka matadalan roteiro atu pronto ajuda.
Good morning. Reporting live from the Dili Convention Center here today is hosting the 6th ministerial meeting of G7+, where nations are gathering together under the theme 15 Years of Unity, Shaping the Future for Peace and Resilience. The meeting aims to not only celebrate its 15 years of existence, but also to review the progress made since its founding. To strengthen cooperation at the ministerial level among member states and as well as set a strategic direction for the future, particularly in fragile to fragile cooperation.
Maluk sira visão husi visão no missão husi existência organização de mais nem maka promove paz no desenvolvimento hari paz no hari estado e a nação membro sira hotu no insamak bele assegura eficácia assistência externa nebe buras benefício ba Timor-Leste mak saída ba Timor-Leste nian liderança e grupo de mais nem maka hakarak sai lalais husi fragilidade hodi hakat ba fiaran ba ia fase de desenvolvimento do unituir nação sira nebe ia rendimento as.
The G7 Plus vision is to promote peace and development by helping fragile countries transition to resilience through stronger state building, local leadership, and more effective international support. The benefits for Timor-Leste through this meeting is to be recognized as a founding and leading member, as well as seen as a success story moving from fragility to stability, as well as to gain influence in global peace and development discussions, and lastly, to strengthen partnership with other fragile states.
Maluk sira atu assisti direta kona ba reunião encontro interministerial entre a nação de setimais sira também horário sei loque diretamente o presidente a abertura o presidente da república no horário kata primeiro-ministro mos sei hatonia discurso e a reunião encontro interministerial deve halau ia CCD.
Now that the meeting is about to begin, we ask that you stay tuned for the following updates.
And chair of G7+, Excellencies Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Head of Delegations of G7+, Member States, Excellencies Members of the National Parliament, Excellencies Members of the 9th Constitutional Government, Excellency Dr. Helder da Costa, Secretary General of the G7+, and members of the Secretariat, Excellency Lieutenant General Domingos Raul Falu Ratalaek, Chief of the Defense Force, Excellency Commissioner of Timor-Leste National Police, distinguished ambassadors and members of the Diplomatic Corps, representatives of the United Nations agencies and international organizations, Excellencies, leaders and representatives of political parties, business associations, representatives of religious affiliations, civil society, private sector, academia and media, arts and culture associations, youth and women's associations, and beloved people of Timor-Leste. distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great honor and deep gratitude that I welcome you all to the 6th Interministerial Meeting of the G7 Plus in Delhi, the capital city of the land of sunrise, Timor-Leste or Timor-Leste. A truly significant gathering, made even more meaningful as it coincides with the 15th anniversary of the G7 Plus. Having traveled near and far, some of you from great distances, it is indeed a privilege to have you all here, joining us on this important occasion. On behalf of the government and the people of Timor-Leste, I extend our warmest greetings to each of you, dear ministers, chiefs of delegation, and VIP delegates. I wish you all a pleasant and enjoyable stay. Please make yourself at home. C'est ici votre maison. Today, we come together not only as representatives of our respective nations, but as members of a unique family, united by a shared history, common challenges, and above all, a collective aspiration to build lasting peace, resilience, and inclusive development in our countries. Over the past 15 years, the G7 Plus has emerged as a powerful voice for fragile and conflict-affected states, advocating for country-led solutions, mutual learning, and solidarity. We have demonstrated that despite the many challenges our nations face, we are not defined by fragility. We are defined by our determination, our hope, and our commitment to shaping a better future for our people. This meeting is both a moment of reflection and a call to action. As we celebrate the milestones we have achieved together, we must also look forward toward shaping the future of peace and resilience across our region and beyond. This 6th ministerial meeting underpins our commitment to mutual respect and collective solidarity, and it signals our dedication to continuously strengthen our coordination mechanisms, aiming at molding our path towards peace consolidation and state building, while promoting democratic principles and ensuring full respect for human values and the rule of law. This event also reaffirms our commitment to amplifying our voices within diplomacy and multilateralism, advocating for inclusive decision-making processes. Just last year, during the COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, the G7 Plus collective voice resonated worldwide with our joint letter sent to the UN Secretary General, being reported by noteworthy press agencies. G7 Plus role has been internationally recognized for securing the specific interests and needs of fragile and least developed countries for the matters of climate change. We have ensured that our concerns would no longer be overlooked in global discussions. The observer status we have secured at the United Nations is a testament to our growing influence and platform from which we can continue to advocate for the rights and interests of our member states, fostering a more equitable global dialogue. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, last year, Timor-Leste proudly celebrated its 25th anniversary of the popular consultation of August 1999. Commemorations took place nationwide, and the celebration were graced by the presence of distinguished guests, including high-level representatives from our bilateral and multilateral partners. His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, joined the Timorese people in this very historic celebration and recognized Timor-Leste's case as a successful one within the United Nations mission. At the same year, Timor-Leste had the blessings of welcoming His Holiness Pope Francis, whose visits underscored our nation's unwavering commitments to peace, freedom, tolerance, and fraternity. Over the past 2 years, Several heads of states, chiefs of governments, and other prominent leaders from friendly countries have also visited Timor-Leste, receiving warm welcome from both our government and our people. This reality testifies the increasing level of political confidence and political stability in our country. As a dedicated member of the United Nations, Timor-Leste upholds a strong moral responsibility to contribute to conflict resolutions efforts within the international community through both bilateral and multilateral mechanisms. Excellencies, I would like to take this opportunity, and I believe I speak on behalf of all of us, to express our profound gratitude to His Excellency Kairala Xanana Guzmão, Prime Minister of Timor-Leste and eminent person to the G7+. This remarkable leader and notable hero put his own heart on the creation of the G7+, 15 years ago. Thank you, Your Excellency. Obrigado, Mombot. I also extend my heartfelt appreciation to His Excellency Dr. José Ramos Horta, President of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste, distinguished Nobel Peace Laureate and a special envoy for the G7+. These two leaders have made invaluable contributions and offer unwavering support to the development and function of these organizations throughout the years. Their visionary leadership and commitment to peace and stability have been instrumental in shaping the G7+ into the influential body it is today. I would like to also pay a special tribute to the Republic of Sierra Leone for its dedicated chairmanship of the G7+ over the past decade. We also acknowledge the presence of Her Excellency Ms. Elizabeth Spear, Assistant Secretary General for Peace-Building Support in the United Nations Development of Political and Peace-Building Affairs. Your presence is very meaningful to us at this 6th ministerial meeting as we celebrate at the same time 15 years of the existence of the G7+. Thank you, Madam. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as host of this important ministerial meeting, I look forward to a constructive exchange of ideas and deep collaboration with my fellow ministers of foreign affairs. Together, we will continue to position the G7+ as a global actor with a powerful voice to consistently represent the countries affected by conflict and fragility. Let us live even more united in purpose and ambition, pushing for a stronger global commitment to peace, justice, and inclusive development. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, c'est vraiment un honneur de vous avoir ici. Profitez bien de votre séjour à Dili. Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Obrigado, Barak.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of Timor-Leste, His Excellency, Mr. Benedito dos Santos Freitas.
Now the opening remarks by Her Excellency, Kenya Balay, the Minister of Planning and Economic Development of Sierra Leone and Chair of G7+.
Your Excellency, José Ramos Horta, President of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste and Special Envoy of the G7+. Your Excellency, Kairala Xanana Guzmão, Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste and eminent person of the G7+. Your Excellency Maria Fernanda Lai, President of the National Parliament of Timor-Leste. Your Excellency Francisco Calbuadi Lai, Deputy Prime Minister coordinating Ministry of Economic Affairs and Minister of Tourism and Environment of Timor-Leste, Your Excellency Bendito Freitas, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of Timor-Leste, Honorable Ministers of G7 Plus countries, distinguished members of the National Parliament of Timor-Leste, Her Excellency Mrs. Elizabeth Sveha, Assistant Secretary General for the Peacebuilding Support Office of the United Nations, ambassadors, heads of agencies, members of civil society, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is a privilege to welcome you at the 6th ministerial meeting of the G7 Plus, where we mark 15 years of unity, resilience, and shared purpose. Today, we gather not only to reflect on our journey, but to forge a path forward in an increasingly complex and uncertain world. At the outset, I extend my deepest gratitude to the government and the people of Timor-Leste, the birthplace of the G7 Plus, for their unwavering commitment to our cause. It was in this very city, in this very hall, that history was made. Timor-Leste, a nation that embodies resilience, has not only championed the G7 Plus, but has supported it politically, morally, and financially. We owe our deepest appreciation to this island nation, whose journey from conflict to peace has been a beacon of hope for all of us. On behalf of the government and people of Sierra Leone, I extend my heartfelt gratitude for the trust you have placed in me to chair the G7 Plus. It has been an honor and a privilege for Sierra Leone to hold this responsibility for the past 10 years, following the leadership of Timor-Leste and the Democratic Republic of Congo. I reaffirm our unwavering commitment to continue playing an even more active role in advancing G7 Plus advocacy, ensuring that the voices of the nations continue to shape global policies on peace building, state building, and development cooperation. I also take this opportunity to express my deep appreciation to the permanent mission of the G7 Plus, missions to United Nations, for their tireless efforts in championing our agenda on the global stage. With the non-permanent membership of the UN Security Council, we will continue working with the following members, with fellow members in promoting the voice of the G7 Plus at the UN. Over the past 15 years, the G7 Plus has grown from a loose coalition to a formidable global force. Our advocacy and collective efforts has transformed how the world approaches peace building, state building, and development cooperation. No longer are our nations passive recipients of international decisions. We are shapers of global policies, amplifying the voices of conflict and fragile affected states on the world stage. Our impact is tangible. The adoption of Sustainable Development Goals 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions, is a direct result of our persistent advocacy. This was not merely a policy victory, but a recognition of the central link between peace, stability, and sustainable development, an argument that has been central in the Dili Declaration that was adopted in this very hall. The Dili Declaration led to the establishment of the New Deal for Engagement in Fragile States, a groundbreaking framework that continues to be relevant today as it was at its inception. It underscored the reality that peace is not just a prerequisite for development, it is development. The principles of country ownership, mutual accountability, and context-driven solutions remain vital in shaping how fragile states navigate their paths towards resilience and prosperity. Furthermore, our observer status at the United Nations has provided a formal seat at the table, allowing us to influence key global discussions and ensure the decisions affecting our countries are made with our input. Nothing about us without us. But beyond policies, the G7 Plus has become a mechanism for real cooperation. Through fragile to fragile collaboration, we have fostered peer learning, technical exchanges, and supported mechanisms to strengthen governance. We have shown that solutions to fragility do not come from outside, they come from within. These milestones would not have been possible without the unwavering dedication and collective efforts of all our fellow G7 Plus members. Our strength lies in solidarity, and together we will continue to champion peace, stability, and sustainable development for our nations and future generations. However, despite these milestones, our work is far from over. The world today is vastly different from when we first came together. We are witnessing a fragmented global order marked by shifting geopolitical dynamics, rising conflicts, climate disasters, economic instability, and rapid advancements in artificial intelligence. The risks to our nations have only multiplied. Once again, conflict-affected states, such as those in the G7 Plus, find themselves disproportionately bearing the consequences of the global crisis. Wars we did not start. Climate change we did not cause. And technological shifts we are yet to benefit from. We must ask ourselves some hard questions. How can we safeguard stability in a world increasingly prone to war? How can we support each other in achieving peace in our countries? How can we ensure that global policies are conducive to our countries? And how can we further strengthen our unity as the G7 Plus? These are the questions that should guide our discussions over the next few days, the next 2 days. Now more than ever, we must stand united. The G7 Plus was born out of necessity, forged in the fire of conflict and hardship, and strengthened by our shared vision of a peaceful future and solidarity. We must continue to be the voice of the 1.5 billion people, the architects of our own future, and the champions of peace and stability. I urge all of you to actively participate, challenge conventional thinking, and propose bold solutions during this ministerial meeting. The world is watching. Our people are counting on us. Let us rise to the occasion. I thank you. Merci. Obrigado.
Thank you, the Madam Chair of G7 Plus, Her Excellency, Ms. Kenya Burley.
And now, video message by the UN United Nations Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres.
Excellencies, I'm pleased to convey my heartfelt greetings to the G7 Plus ministerial meeting as you mark your 15th anniversary in Delhi, where your inspiring journey began. This city, like many of your countries, symbolizes both the wounds of conflict and the strength and resolve it takes to overcome them. And I was deeply moved by your wonderful hospitality as we marked the 25th anniversary of the independence referendum last year. Your people understand better than most the heavy cost of fragility and the daily work of rebuilding lives with dignity and hope. Your organization was born from that spirit of resilience and purpose, and the shared recognition that lasting peace is the foundation of progress. Over the years, you have championed cooperation, solidarity, and country-led solutions. You have also made a difference at the global level, including through your leadership in helping to secure Sustainable Development Goal 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions. Yet, fragilities are deepening around the world. Protracted conflicts, widening inequalities, and the raging climate crisis are fueling displacement and instability, with your nations often bearing the heaviest burden despite contributing least to this crisis. These plights cannot be ignored. The world cannot let your calls go unanswered. We need solidarity for solutions, and that is the spirit of the Pact for the Future that you helped shape. The Pact charts a course to reform peace and security cooperation, prioritizing conflict prevention, mediation, and peace building. It seeks to strengthen coordination, including South-South cooperation, to develop innovative approaches and expand opportunities for women and young people. The Pact also calls for reform of the global financial architecture through bigger and bolder multilateral development banks, effective debt relief for fragile economies, an annual SDG stimulus of $500 billion, and better access to concessional finance, recognizing vulnerabilities through the multidimensional vulnerability index. We must push the world to deliver on those commitments, including at the Force Financing for Development conference in June. And we must push for climate justice. Many of you are on the front lines, watching as rising seas and extreme weather threaten lives and livelihoods. As we prepare for COP30, we need to see countries turn promises into action. Developed countries must scale up adaptation finance. We need meaningful contributions to the fund for loss and damage. And we need confidence the $1.3 trillion will be delivered. Excellencies, your journey over the past 15 years shows us that solidarity is a common responsibility. As we work to tackle global challenges and implement the Pact for the Future, your voices will be vital to strengthen multilateralism, prevent conflict, and forge a future of dignity and sustainable development for all. Thank you.
And now, the video presentation of the G7 Plus.
These are the lands of resilience, nations rich in history, culture, and untapped potential. The people of these countries dream and aspire for peace, development, and prosperity, innovate and build, striving for a brighter future. Yet, for too long, these countries have been viewed through the lens of international security and conflict. They are often seen as problems to be managed, rather than partners in shaping solutions. Caught in the geopolitical and geoeconomic struggles of global and regional hegemons, these nations have had to navigate shifting alliances, economic dependencies, and foreign interventions, sometimes at great cost to their own stability and development. Born from the struggles of nations like the G7 Plus emerged in 2010 to challenge stereotypes. Fragility isn't failure, it's a call for context-driven solutions. Their mission, to reclaim ownership of their future, forging a path toward lasting peace, stability, and shared prosperity, built on the principles of solidarity and cooperation. To reshape the global narrative, ensuring that their realities are defined not by fragility, but by resilience, determination, and the aspirations of their people.
The reality of fragile countries must shape global discussions. For too long, decisions about our nations have been made without us. Policies imposed, priorities dictated, and aid delivered in ways that overlook our realities. But the G7 Plus made all efforts to change that. Together, we demand a new world order, one that values inclusion over exclusion, cooperation over conditionality, and justice over short-term fixes. A world where peace is not an afterthought, but the foundation of development.
By reframing fragility as multidimensional, spanning peace, institution, governance, justice, the G7 Plus shifted global policy. No more one-size-fits-all aid, only partnerships built on trust.
"15 years ago, we set out to change the way the world sees fragility. Today, we stand as proof that resilience, leadership, and solidarity can create lasting peace. The work is not done, but the path forward is clear."
The G7 Plus pioneered the New Deal, a blueprint for peace-first development. Its heartbeat, the peace-building and state-building goals, their crowning achievement, embedding peace into the Sustainable Development Goals. SDG 16, peace, justice, strong institutions, bears the G7 Plus's fingerprints.
If people can access justice, if they feel represented by strong and accountable institutions, they will turn less easily to violence.
Promoting peace and stability should continue to be central to implementing the SDGs, as violence and insecurity undermine development gains.
From Timor-Leste supporting Guinea-Bissau's elections, to Ebola crisis, to dialogue and reconciliations in Central African Republic, G7 Plus nations lead by example. Their mantra, nothing about us without us.
In that it demonstrates that we within the G7 Plus grouping are not waiting for the world to change, but are determined to change it for ourselves. And we will change it through unity, cooperation, and most of all, commitment. We will continue to push for a world where no country, especially fragile states, is left behind.
Through fragile to fragile cooperation, we have demonstrated that the best support comes from those who understand the challenge firsthand. Whether rebuilding governance, strengthening public finance, or sharing lessons on peace building, G7 Plus countries are standing together because who are better to help a nation heal and rebuild than those who have walked the same path. This is more than assistance. It is solidarity in action, a model where countries are not passive recipients, but active partners in shaping their own future.
The G7 Plus has transformed the global conversation on fragility. Their advocacy at the World Bank led to a 50% increase in funding for fragile states under IDA 17, securing more resources where they are needed most. For the first time, fragility was recognized as a priority in global financing. But their fight did not stop there. As climate crises, food insecurity, and debt burdens intensify, the G7 Plus continues to push for solutions tailored to fragile contexts. Their advocacy helped secure a dedicated WB Fragility, Conflict and Violence (FCV) strategy, ensuring that financing is not just available, but accessible.
For the first time, the Somali government has recruited over 6,000 public sector teachers so that we can improve, as the Prime Minister of Chad and others have identified, the quality of schooling of our children. For the first time, we're investing through country systems on health sector. Why am I highlighting these very, specific examples? It was the absence of country systems and viable state institutions that was the root cause of the vulnerabilities to begin with.
At the IMF, the G7 Plus has called for fairer debt relief mechanisms, ensuring that fragile states are not trapped in cycles of crisis. In a world where development finance often fails the most vulnerable, the G7 Plus is bridging the gaps, turning promises into action.
That we welcome first the strategy by the fund and the ongoing actions to better understand the root causes and drivers of risk and fragility, but also employ, I will call it tailor-made resilience solutions that will emphasize the partnership that we're trying to build, bringing your staff closer to our context on the ground. Greater proximity in our countries, I think, is important, but also enhance your surveillance in lending and capacity building tools.
And we will continue to champion unity, reconciliation, conflict prevention, and climate action, and drive home the point I just made, that our nations refuse to be left behind.
In December 2019, the G7 Plus achieved a historic milestone: UN Observer status, a platform to amplify voices long ignored. For the first time, the voices of conflict-affected and fragile states were given a permanent platform at the world's most influential stage. No longer just subjects of debate, G7 Plus countries are now active participants, shaping global policies that directly impact their futures.
The United Nations was founded on the principle of equality among nations, yet too often our countries have been sidelined. The G7 Plus is changing that. As a UN observer, we are no longer just seeking solutions, we are part of shaping them. Our voices, our experiences, and our aspirations must guide a more inclusive, just, and peaceful world.
We cannot overstate the importance of international laws and regulations that are meant to protect the basic rights of people of the UN to obtain peace, dignity, freedom, and prosperity. We see no clear pathway to sustainable peace or conflict prevention without respect and consideration for these shared rules and norms. Multilateral cooperation is indispensable to respect these tenets and treaties. Since increasing geopolitical geoeconomic fragmentation hinders the realization of these norms, we see an urgent need for inclusive multilateralism. This includes making reforms within the UN, especially the Security Council and the General Assembly.
Despite its progress, the conflict-affected nations continues to face challenges. Yet, the G7 Plus remains steadfast. Our pathway forward is clear. We will continue promoting solidarity as the only way to address common challenges, strengthen our collective voice, advocate for fairer global policies, and expand fragile-to-fragile cooperation. We will push for stronger commitments to peace and inclusive development, because no nation should be left behind in the pursuit of stability and prosperity.
The voices of fragile states can no longer be ignored. The G7 Plus is not just a platform. It is a movement for fairness, for justice, and for a global order that truly serves all nations.
But shaping the future requires a voice in the present. We demand seats at the table, from the UN Security Council to COP summits, because decisions about us must include us.
Our journey proves that fragile states are not defined by their challenges, but by their ability to rise above them. The world must recognize that peace and development go hand in hand, and the G7 Plus is leading that transformation.
As we mark 15 years of unity and resilience, our mission remains unchanged: to champion peace, to demand fairness, and to build a world where development is not a privilege, but a right for all nations. With solidarity, cooperation, innovation, and unshakable resolve, the G7 Plus is lighting the path. Not just for our members, but for a world where no nation is left behind.
And now, keynote speech by His Excellency Dr. José Ramos Horta, President of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste and Special Envoy of the G7 Plus.
Please be seated. Excellency Mombotsanana Guzmão, Prime Minister of Timor-Leste, Excellency Maria Fernanda Lai, President of the National Parliament, Excellency Deputy Prime Minister Francisco Abualdo Lai, Ministers and delegates from the G7 Plus countries, members of the National Parliament of Timor-Leste, ambassadors, members of the Diplomatic Corps, United Nations, representatives of the media, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good morning and welcome all to Dili, the birthplace of the G7 Plus. It is with immense pleasure that I address you today at this sixth ministerial meeting of the G7 Plus, an occasion that marks 15 years of our collective struggle, resilience, and determination. Your presence on our soil honors us and fills our homes with joy. When the G7 Plus was first established in 2010, I was serving as the second president of Timor-Leste, my first term in office. Our country had just emerged from the political instability, security crisis of 2006, a period of deep uncertainty and division. But our struggle for stability did not begin there. For 24 years, Timor-Leste endured occupation, conflict, immense hardship, leaving deep scars on our nation and people. Yet, despite this painful history, we chose a different path, not one of revenge, but of reconciliation, dialogue, national unity. The pursuit of truth and justice, combined with deliberate efforts to rebuild trust and heal divisions, allowed Timor-Leste to transition from conflict to peace and stability. Reconciliation was not merely a policy. It was a necessity for our survival as a nation. It required immense political will, courage, and above all, a collective determination to move forward rather than remain trapped by the wounds of the past. It was the vision and the leadership of Mombotsanana Guzmão that guided us to leave behind the bitterness of the past and embark on a new chapter of our destiny. Our country also gained valuable experience in managing international engagement, having hosted several United Nations missions that supported our transition to stability. However, the ultimate responsibility for our peace and stability rested in our hands. The lesson we learned is clear. National ownership of the peace process is essential for its success. That vision of peace, tolerance, and unity has shaped our national pursuit ever since. Today, Timor-Leste is a peaceful nation, an active player in multilateralism, and a firm champion of global cooperation. We became the first country to officially adopt the document on human fraternity for world peace and living together. The document, allow me to divert a bit from the formal speech to explain a bit. The document on human fraternity for world peace and living together was crafted by His Holiness Papa Francisco and the Grand Imam, Professor Tayeb of Al-Azhar, Cairo, over a period of 1 year, leading to a world religious conference in Abu Dhabi with the presence of Papa Francisco and the Grand Imam. Then when the document was signed in 2019, and Timor-Leste in 2022 became the first country to officially, by an act of parliament, to adopt the document on human fraternity for all peace living together as a national document, and at the same time adapting it to our national curriculum. I continue. We are active members of the CPLP, G7, WTO, and soon to become members of ASEAN. All of this was made possible because of our unwavering commitment to reconciliation, a shared vision for prosperity. These lived experiences shape our conviction that fragile states must define their own path to peace. It was no surprise then that Timor-Leste joined hands with other nations to form the G7+, challenging the status quo of international engagement in conflict-affected countries. We understood that for peace to be sustainable, it must be driven by those who have lived through war, not imposed from outside. When the G7+ was conceived, I witnessed firsthand the aspiration of its founding nations, nations that had endured war, fragility, and underdevelopment. They came together with a bold vision to turn their shared struggles into a platform for transformation. We understood that the international system, as it was structured, had failed to address our challenges. The Millennium Development Goals, MDGs, had left many of us behind. The international aid system remained fragmented and ineffective, and conflicts continue to devastate countries like ours while global governance mechanisms remain indifferent. It was in response to this reality that G7+ was born, not as another diplomatic initiative, but as a movement. A movement to ensure that conflict-affected nations would no longer be passive recipients of external decisions, but active voices shaping their own futures. It is this vision that must continue to guide us as we face the future. Today, as the G7 group reflects on the collective journey, we must acknowledge that we live in an era of profound uncertainty. The global landscape is shifting rapidly, and not always in ways that favor peace and stability. Geopolitical tensions are escalating. Climate change is no longer a theoretical risk, but an existential crisis, particularly for vulnerable states. Economic disparities continue to widen, and once again, it's the nations of the Global South, our nations, that bear the brunt of this crisis. The international system that was designed to safeguard peace, prevent wars, promote mutual respect, has failed to meet these challenges. Its failure is not accidental. It was embedded in its very foundation. The world order that emerged after the Second World War was designed by a handful of powerful states, structured to serve their interests, rather than to build a just and inclusive global system. It was established under the guise of universalism, but has often operated selectively, imposing rules on some while allowing others to break them with impunity. We have long been told that the world operates under, I quote, a rules-based order, end of quote. But we must ask, whose rules? Who truly abides by them? The reality is that the global system we rely on has been driven by power, not principles. And today, as power dynamics shift, the system is failing to adapt. This moment in history presents an opportunity to correct the imbalances of the past and reimagine an international order that is truly just, inclusive, and reflective of the voices of all nations, not just the powerful few. For too long, our countries have been caught in the middle of geopolitical rivalries that had little to do with us. While much of the world, particularly the global north, reaped the benefits of peace and economic progress, our nation became the fuel for a so-called Cold War, one that was anything but cold for us. We were pressured to take sides in conflicts we did not create, and too often our lands became the battleground for these contests of hegemony. Many of our countries are still struggling to recover from the scars of that era. The legacy of the Cold War lingers in places like Afghanistan, Yemen, Somalia, just to name a few. And now, once again, the world finds itself entangled in a cocktail of crises, marked by deepening divisions that only serve to exacerbate global challenges. The United Nations, the last resort for our countries, remain one of the most critical platforms for shaping global governance. Yet it continues to suffer from structural imbalances. The Security Council, in particular, remains dominated by a handful of nations, some of whom yield their power to obstruct meaningful reform and uphold their own strategic interests rather than global peace. I have long been an advocate for a more inclusive and representative UN, and I'm encouraged that 2 of our G7 member states now serve as non-permanent members of the UN Security Council. But this is not enough. We must continue to demand a seat at the table. With observer status, G7 must actively push for the Security Council and other UN bodies to be more democratic and accountable. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, over the past 15 years, the G7 has worked relentlessly to amplify the voices of conflict-affected countries, ensuring that their challenges and aspirations are recognized on the global stage. It has championed peace and stability efforts rooted in national ownership, advocating for a shift away from externally imposed solutions towards approaches that truly reflect the needs of our nation. For this, I extend my deepest appreciation to the leaders of the G7 Plus, its member states, and especially the G7 Secretariat, Dr. Elder Costa and his team for your tireless efforts in advancing this noble cause. Your dedication has made the G7 Plus not just a coalition, but a true force for change. But there is still much work to be done. As we look ahead, let us reaffirm our commitment to three fundamental objectives. First, we must continue to collectively advocate for reforms in international institutions. The rules that govern the global order must be rewritten to ensure they are inclusive, equitable, and reflective of the realities of all nations, especially those emerging from conflict and fragility. As a unified bloc, we must scale up our efforts to negotiate the rules of engagement, ensuring that our countries are not mere recipients of decisions made elsewhere, but active participants in shaping policies that impact us directly. The G7 Plus has already demonstrated its potential by gaining access to key policy forums, where it has positioned itself as a credible voice in discussions on peace building, development cooperation, trade, climate change, food security, and beyond. We must now build on this momentum, ensuring that our advocacy translates into real, lasting reforms that empower our nation to shape their own future. Second, we must strengthen our solidarity, because that is the true strength of G7+. Solidarity is not just a principle, it is the foundation of our collective resilience. It is what has allowed us to stand together and amplify our voices. Now more than ever, the G7 Plus must step up its efforts to support member states facing active conflict. We cannot stand by while our brothers and sisters in the DRC, Yemen, Haiti, South Sudan, Afghanistan, and other nations in the global south endure unimaginable suffering. Through peer-to-peer support, knowledge sharing, and initiatives like Fragile to Fragile Cooperation, we have the power to build resilience from within. We have the experience, the wisdom, the determination to help each other overcome conflict and fragility. Third, we must promote national ownership in all aspects of peace and development. Sustainable progress can only be achieved when it is led by those who understand their own challenges best: our governments, our communities, our people. International support must align with national priorities, not dictate them. Let me highlight a platform that speaks directly to the priorities of this room: the Global Task Force on Social Protection for Nutrition, co-chaired by Timor-Leste and Chile, with the World Food Programme serving as its secretariat and backed by G7+. The GTF responds to a specific gap in the international architecture. While many platforms work on social protection, few place nutrition at the center, and even fewer respond directly to the unique challenges faced by the least and landlocked developed countries, LDCs, and fragile states. The GTF reframes the narrative. Fragile and least developed countries are not just support recipients. They are knowledge producers, policy leaders, and drivers of innovation, from school feeding and digital registries to maternal cash transfers and community-led targeting. At a time when global solidarity is fragile, the Peace. F is building bridges between local realities and global commitments, between technical innovation and political leadership, and between countries that are too often left behind and the policies meant to serve them. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, our work ahead is far from over, which demands even greater courage, persistence, and vision. We must not settle for the status quo. We must not allow ourselves to be marginalized in global decision-making. We must see this moment to shape a new narrative, one in which our nations are recognized not as problems to be solved, but as partners in building a more just and peaceful world. I wish you all meaningful and productive discussions over the next 2 days. I hope that the organizers have reserved enough time for our visitors to have some quality time in visiting our city and les arrondissements, the areas around Delhi. May your deliberation be constructive and impactful. Enjoy your stay in Delhi. Thank you, merci, and God bless us all.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Mr. President of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste, and Special Envoy of the G7+, Dr. José Ramos Horta. And now, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, next is our photo session. Please remain seated. For all the delegations and delegates, please check on the package that's been handed over to you. Inside there is a woven tie scarf to be used for our photo session. We're going to be calling from the back row. If your name is called, please make your way, and our LO, liaison officer, will guide you to the stage outside for the photo session. For the back row, Mr. Donald Arab, Mr. Abdul Karir Mohammed Yusuf, Ms. Mary Walenenea, Ms. Amisatu Kumba Kamara, Ms. Abby Elizabeth Kamara, Dr. Hermanson Makwengo, Mr. Jonathan Woodsworth, His Excellency Ambassador Serif Obalde, Mr. Serge Caleb Musasa Mbula, Mr. Rossi Paul Juanchite, Mr. Pierre Claver Gisabira. So inside the package there's also ties. Please grab the ties with you.
For the middle row, I would like to invite Mrs. Elizabeth Mary Spehar, Her Excellency Mr. Wahidullah Waisi, His Excellency Mr. Jeprin Maniratanga, His Excellency Mr. Marius Aristides Hoza, Mr. Zagna Moxia, Mr. Gaji Rabe,
His Excellency Mr. Samba Sane, His Excellency Mr. Michael Imran Kanu,
and Mr. Habib Mayer.
And finally, with respect, we'd like to invite also Dr. Helder da Costa, Her Excellency Mrs. Frances Piaget Al-Ghali, the Honorable Mr. Isaac Mohammed Mursal, Honorable Ms. Gracia Yamba Kazadi, Honorable Mr. Peter Chanel Agobaka, Her Excellency Mrs. Kenya Barlai, Chancellor Jerry Mobarai Arma, His Excellency Mr. Bendito Freitas, His Excellency Mambot Kerala Shanara Guzmão, Her Excellency Dra. Maria Fernanda Lai, and His Excellency Dr. José Ramos Horta. The photo session will take 5 minutes. Please remain seated.
Diak belong ouvintes no haranan sirhoto hidana kita foi acompanha hamotok discussão encontro ministerial ba dalanenia entre nação G7 mais nação Oranulu mebe nação hasoi menciona kata nação neng la participa tamba situação e arrelarang. Ya belum ouvintes no haranan sira. Ya agora kita tambah iha sesang hasil foto yang entre participantes sira. Ya nebe ami nafating husuba itu bawa serato nafating iha kenal radio tu Timor-Leste nian hodi acompaña ambiente nebe maga acontece iha sucede ke kolidili. Ya anesang ami nafating menciona ba hitabot sira katak liliu ba membro si nasaung sirne maka involve ya G7 mesenium nasang Afghanistan, Burundi, Chad, Comores, Costa do Marfim, Guiné-Bissau, Guiné, nomos Haiti, Ilhas Salomão, Yemen, Libéria, Papua Nova Guiné, República Centro-Africana, República Democrática do Congo, São Tomé e Príncipe, Sierra Leone, Somália, Sudão do Sul, Timor-Leste, no Tonga. Ya nune irene maka ohing toto acompanha hare discurso si tenia presidente da República nomos le foi bem-vindo si tenia ministro de negócios estrangeiros senhor Dr. Bendito Freitas e aussi discurso hirakne atau faham imba malu leleu relembrar a existência aussi G7 mais nenhum e a história de existência aussi nação grupo que movimento G7 mais né a nação nasa leleu hareleu nação ser mesmo que passa aussi conflitos nebe maka processo recuperação pós-conflito nenhum. Ya narang hanasang tatana kata G7 mais lebih maka surge representa esse grupo nação itu ya lebih maka hola parte by existência da Ucrânia.
Maluk sir hanesan ohini ita acompanha na programa live streaming liga ho encontro interministerial di seti mais yen nebe halau ia sisi dili hanesan ohini ita acompanha na mos iha discurso presidente República nian José Ramos Horta nebe hateten kata ka human fraternity world peace nebe fo firma iha tinan rin rua sanulu resensia Timor-Leste adota dokumento ne iha tinan rin rua nulu resen rua ho crise hotu nebe lao iha estado membro sira iha G7 mais ita tem que hamutuk atu resolve problema sirane força solidariedade garantia iha ni advocacia Iha discurso anesan ohin ta acompañamos além de presidente república nia discurso. Iha mos ministro negócios estrangeiros, nomos representante husi nação membro G7 maisian anesan Sierra Leone. Nebe iha ami resumo kata ka sirnya discurso ne compromisso ba multilateralismo no construção badame. Líder sir hato apoio ba cooperação multilateral atu garante dame no estabilização. Rua maka atu ha força cooperação iha nação membro G7 mais. Líder sir fo valor ba partilha experiência entre Estado membro sira atu enfrenta fragilidade no desenvolvimento. Tolo maka advocacia ba desenvolvimento. Discurso foi atenção para a importância da no estabilização união atu alcança objetivo de desenvolvimento sustentável no precisa apoio internacional.
With the following speeches that we have accompanied, with the three ones that has been said, they have covered the 3 points here, which is about commitment to multilateralism and peace building, as well as strengthening cooperation within the G7 plus member states, as well as becoming an advocacy for sustainable development. And with the final one, which is the speech from the president, is highlighting about the Human Fraternity World Peace, which was signed in 2019, and how Timor-Leste adopted that document in 2022, as well as highlighting that with all the crises around the G7 plus member states that are currently going on, that we must stand together to find a solution to resolve these issues. And finally, he highlighted the importance of strengthening solidarity as well as ensuring our advocacy.
Maluksira ami hakarak lata bet bocera katak nação membro G7 mais ne hamutu gruanulu nebe Timor-Leste makanesan nação fundador, doador, inspirador ba existência organização ne ia tinan rihun ruas sanulu liba. Tuir agenda ka dados nebe ami acesso kata kusi nação membro ruanulu ne nação sanulu resinhat inclui Timor-Leste maka participa iha encontro interministerial ba ohin loronian no nação seluk la participa ho questão política no segurança iha sirnya nação maka la permite sira atu participa iha encontro interministerial batinan riun ruanulu resin 5 nomos âmbito ba comemoração aniversário tinan sanulu resin 5 existência organização G7 mais.
Founded in 2010 here in Dili, Timor-Leste, where right now is also celebrating its 15th anniversary under the theme of 15 years of unity, shaping the future for peace and resilience. We would also like to let you know that out of the 20 member countries, only 15 are able to attend this meeting, and with the rest still overcoming its security as well as some of its conflict issues that does not permit them to be here today, but hopefully with the discussions that has been going on, there will be a solution to resolve those, so they are present for the following ministerial meeting in the future.
Ami hakarak informo ba itabocira katak encontro interministerial ba tinang dane se halau durante loron rua hahu ohin nebe halau ia centro convenção dili nomos se termina iha loron sanulu resing ida aban iha Timor-Leste tuiro agenda katak daderne sessão daderne halau abertura ia centro convenção dili depois de encontro técnico interministerial se halau iha hotel Spring Dili Fatuhada Dili.
With the opening meeting being held here at the Dili Convention Center, the following technical meeting will be at the Palm Spring Hotel, and the meeting will end tomorrow on the 12th.
Maluksira ami hakarak relata na fatim baita bocera kata programa transmissão lai direct kala transmissão tatolinian hetan output husi RTTL EP.
We would also like to inform you that this live transmission, is exceptionally appreciated by RTTL for their collaboration with us to make this live a success.
Hare malu di reconcilia malu, desenvolve economia, desenvolvimento sornia setor produtivo non nebele for benefício para esse povo. Tama label envolve drag bebê que funo, tama funo la manambo tira. Tama nema Timor-Leste itanori botin hotuba itene malu sira.
Durante ne karika saída maka itu bot se halo husi ohimbawen de luba na sound ser maka orang sendak se enfrenta liu conflito fragilidade sila.
Agora ita caráter de telespectador sira já se mais retan suporte macasos e parceiros internacionais e agora dá que ita fatin atu kuliah taman telori experiência timor-leste e não temos de bela faz não faz experiência de cooperação frágil e daí te pode ser bela rega da parceiro sira agora carga ta jura e se serviço hamuto de bela lore Timor-Leste narang by mundo internacional.
Durante lorong rua iha discussão encontro ministerial idane karika resultado husirane saída maka ite tem que halo ba futuro.
Ne ite bot hen lai tambah daqui a 2 dias ite se essa resolução também ite ne anu se comunica ba comunicação social.
Obrigado barak ba. Dia telespectadores no ouvintes Rádio Televisão Timor-Leste, bonita botira acompanha tia entrevista na bema kami halau ho secretário-geral GG mais na bema ka hodia atualiza no baita botira kata ka konaba objetivo geral husi encontro ministerial na bema ka ohen realiza ia centro convenção dele liu konaba encontro ministerial nomos ba existência tina sanulur sen lima ba GG mais INB tina sanulur resen lima liba koto ka fatini da nema ka pode funda duni ka GG mais nebe makanya sede hari duni ki dili Timor-Leste. Tamane ouvintes no telespectadores Rádio Televisão Timor-Leste atu informos kata kafoinde copy break se continua na fatin ho discussão ser mesmo ka iha centro convenção dele ho de hare avaliação ka halo discussão no revisão ba desafios no atingimento mesmo ka durante zige sete mais sira halau liu ho de hare liu ba iha nação mesmo ka iha conflito no mos fragilidade sira também ouvintes no telespectadores Rádio Televisão Timor-Leste turmai hasiluri to botira ba acompanha lá informação balo iha estúdio central a fonte se continua na faten transmissão direta iha centro convenção dele.
terms of promoting peace, mediating peace, and restoring democracy. So we should be proud. Yeah, our leaders are proud. Over the past 15 years, we've done a lot, and now it gets recognition from the United Nations. And now the work ahead is now widely recognized, more responsibility on our shoulder, and we need to show to the world, including our leaders, to show humility and to show perseverance and determination in order to continue to work on fragile to fragile cooperation, helping others.
And also, what vision does Timor-Leste have for the future growth and impact of the G7 Plus?
Timor-Leste is a testament, as Minister Bandito mentioned, and the Foreign Affairs Minister mentioned, that Timor-Leste, we want Timor-Leste to be a global mediator for peace in the long run. So this is one of the building blocks. You know? So the G7 Plus basically is complementing the foreign affairs political tool, you know, in order to promote peace, stability, and development.
Thank you very much, Secretary General, for your time and to sharing with us these details. Thank you. That is all from the Secretary General, saying the key points that are highlighted from the meeting today. Stay tuned for the following reports that we will be making.
Precisa visitar um bote de channel no canal da sala, não tá? Não, não, se você usa tudo, se tem lá total visual dele.
Mana el celaya mana to? Ikut kelaya na to?
Bukan dari
We now invite with respect for all the ladies and gentlemen and excellencies to please be seated.
Dilatando ao respeito, eu me convido a excelentíssima senhora Serroto, a tu, por favor, verifique a boa de assento, a tu também a rua e tem sessão, tua irmã.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we'll now continue with our next session on safeguarding peace in turbulent time, the grand vision of G7+, a speech by His Excellency Mambot Karala Shanana Guzmão, the Prime Minister of Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste and eminent person of G7+.
My dear President of the Republic, dear President of the National Parliament, Mrs. Keynote Berlay, Minister of Planning and Economic Development of Sierra Leone and Chairwoman of the G7+, the home of the G7+. 15 years ago, I stood on this very stage as the Prime Minister of Timor-Leste, addressing the first gathering of the G7+. At the time, our group had yet to be formally recognized. Independence, and Timor-Leste was still the youngest nation of the world. Yet, despite our fragile circumstances, we came together with a bold vision, a vision of peace, resilience, and the right of our countries to shape their own destinies. From the very beginning, I believed that this group had the potential to grow, not only in number, but in influence. I insisted that we must continue to expand, institutionalize our efforts, and strengthen our ability to harmonize and align international assistance with our priorities, ensuring that it would serve the real needs of our people rather than being dictated by external agendas. The G7+ was born out of shared struggles from countries that had suffered war, instability, and external interventions that often failed to bring lasting peace. We joined hands to improve the effectiveness of the global aid system, to share our lessons with each other, and to support one another in shaping a new development model, one that is guided by a vision of lasting peace and self-reliance. Despite coming from different geographies, cultures, and political systems, we were united by a common understanding. The success of making, building, and sustaining peace depends on our ability to take full ownership to our trajectory. 1 year after the first meeting, I traveled to Juba, South Sudan, for the second G7 Plus gathering, a G7 Plus retreat. At the time, South Sudan had just gained independence. I saw in its people the same aspirations for prosperity that I had witnessed in Timor-Leste after our long struggle. Their determination for a brighter future reaffirmed our collective mission to ensure that our countries are not treated as problems to be solved, but as nations with the potential to lead their own transformation. We left Juba with great enthusiasm, determined to change the international aid system, which had long failed our nations. The same year, we endorsed the New Deal for Engagement in Fragile States, a framework that aimed to shift the power dynamics in international cooperation, giving conflict-affected states control over their own peace-building and development processes. This was supposed to reshape the global narrative, ensuring that our countries were not merely recipients of aid, but equal partners in their development. The New Deal was a significant achievement influencing the global development agenda and leading to the inclusion of a standalone goal on peace, SDG 16, in the 2030 agenda. However, despite the success, the behaviors of international institutions and donor countries did not change. The aid architecture remained stuck in the same outdated models, managing fragility rather than helping countries overcome it. As we gather 15 years later, the G7 Plus has grown into a stronger and more structured platform with a formal charter and observer status at the United Nations. It has made a significant impact on the global policy discourse and in recognition as an influential voice for conflict-affected countries. Through peer learning and cooperation, it has fostered solidarity and knowledge sharing among its members, strengthening our collective ability to navigate challenges. These achievements, along with many other milestones that the G7 Plus Secretariat will highlight today, are a testament to our unity, resilience, and unwavering commitment to the cause of this group. I commend the dedication of all member states and the tireless efforts of the Secretariat, whose work has been instrumental in advancing our shared vision. However, as we gather today to review our progress, we must ask ourselves, where do our countries stand? Has the international system evolved to better serve countries in fragile situations, or are we still struggling with the same challenges? What should be the direction of our collective journey from here onward? The unfortunate reality is that while the G7 Plus has become influential, the world is in turmoil and remains turbulent. Conflicts have become more protracted and devastating. Inequality and political instability continue to fuel now new crises. The climate emergency has become a threat to the survival of humanity, worsening hunger, displacement, and resource scarcity. The very institutions that were meant to safeguard global peace have failed to meet these challenges. Instead of working towards a just and inclusive world, powerful nations continue to shape global policies based on their own strategic interests, while a good majority of countries in the global south remain sidelined. Excellencies, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, in 2013, I undertook my second mission to South Sudan. Alongside meeting with the country's leaders, I visited the village of Malo in the state of Jonglei, where the government of Timor-Leste had provided a small grant for the construction of a primary school. Once again, I was moved by the resilience and determination of the people, their unwavering resolve for peace and stability despite the hardships they had endured. However, why always we use however? In this case, I have to. However, beneath this hope, I could sense political tensions and crises. I made a heartfelt plea to South Sudan's leaders to do everything in their power to prevent conflict from taking root. From Timor-Leste's own painful experience, I knew how difficult it is to rebuild peace once a nation falls into civil war. I warned them that if conflict erupts, it would take years, perhaps decades, to restore stability, and the cost of human lives would be immense. Tragically, just a few days after my visit, South Sudan plunged into conflict. a war that would drag on for years, leaving behind hundreds of thousands of deaths, mass displacement, hunger, and deepening poverty. I attended the second ministerial retreat of the G7 Plus in Haiti in 2012, a country that has long suffered from political instability, natural disasters, and economic hardship. During my visit, I witnessed the same desire in all parts of Haitian society for peace, stability, and the opportunity to rebuild this nation. Despite the challenges of governance, security crisis, and recurring humanitarian disasters, the resilience of the Haitian people remains unshaken. However, like many of our nations, Haiti has been left at a cycle of instability. I led a mission to Guinea-Bissau in 2014, a country that the international community had abandoned, to share our experience on peace and democracy using the principles of G7+. I carried the message of peace, advocating for stability and democracy. I repeated the same plea to the leaders to respect the will of the people and refrain from undemocratic means to gain power. I also led G7+ missions to the Central African Republic in 2014 and 2015 to help facilitate dialogue between warring factions, drawing from our own experiences of conflict resolution and reconciliation. I met with citizens, displaced communities, and the leaders of opposing groups, all of whom shared a common aspiration, peace and stability in their country. Their voices were clear. They longed for an end to the violence that had torn their nation apart. As a result of our efforts, the Bangui Forum was established, a platform that brought together all stakeholders in a renewed push of peace. This process led to an agreement that included key provisions such as disarmament, demobilization, reintegration, and repatriation, essential steps towards ending the cycle of conflict. To ensure that these commitments were implemented, we sought support from bilateral and multilateral donors. We knocked on the doors of the World Bank and other international institutions, making a strong plea for financial assistance to support this aid-orphan yet resource-rich country and its people. But, however, again, instead of action, we were met with bureaucratic delays and indifference. Promises were made, yet tangible support remained elusive. A stark reminder of the failures of aid system to respond when fragile states need it most. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry. I only can recommend you, please don't smoke. I'm trying to help you. During our meeting in Kabul, Afghanistan, in 2016, I brought with me the experiences of national dialogue and reconciliation. That had been instrumental in establishing other conflict-affected nations. In 2016, at the G7 Plus ministerial meeting, I shared these lessons with Afghanistan's leaders, emphasizing that reconciliation and inclusive dialogue were the only path to sustainable peace. Following the ministerial meeting, I held bilateral discussions with Afghan government officials, urging them to initiate a genuine national dialogue, one that included all factions and voices within Afghan society. We strongly advocated for an intra-Afghan dialogue, a process that would allow the country to take charge of its own peace efforts rather than relying on externally driven solutions. We also called on international community to support this effort, warning that without a locally owned reconciliation process, Afghanistan's future would remain uncertain. But our appeals fell on deaf ears. The international community remained firm in its own approach, unwilling to recognize that externally imposed solutions would not bring lasting peace. Instead of listening to the voices of the Afghan people who had suffered decades of war, instability and foreign interventions, global powers pursued their own interests, treating Afghanistan as a pawn in geopolitical games rather than a nation with the right to determine its own destiny. After 20 years of so-called war on terrorism, Afghanistan was ultimately left to its own fate. The same international actors that had justified intervention in the name of stability walked away, leaving behind uncertainty, suffering, and an unfinished struggle for peace. It was a painful reminder that when peace is dictated by external forces rather than shaped by the will of the people, it is destined to be short-lived. I visited the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, and was deeply struck by both the resilience of its people and the immense untapped potential of the nation. This is a country rich in natural resources, a country that, if given the opportunity, could fuel the development of an entire region. Its vast mineral wealth, fertile land, and a strategic position should have made it a pillar of stability and prosperity in Africa. Yet, instead of prosperity, the DRC has been plagued by conflict and exploitation. It is heartbreaking to see how this great nation has become a victim of global greed, where multinational corporations, external powers, and vested interests drive on the instability. Instead of fostering development, they extract wealth from the land while leaving destruction in their wake. Today, the eastern region of the DRC remains engulfed in violence, a conflict not just rooted in internal issues, but fueled by external actors and regional rivalries. The suffering of its people is not an accident. It is a consequence of deliberate exploitation and neglect by the international community. While world leaders issue statements of condemnation, their words carry no action, no real commitment to ending the suffering of innocent people. The DRC, like so many of our nations, remains a stark example of how fragile states are left to stand for themselves while global powers prioritize their own interests over peace and stability. This is the bitter reality we must confront, and it is why the G7 Plus must continue to fight for a world where our countries are not longer pawns in the games of the powerful, but architects of their own future. I have closely followed the path of the other G7 Plus member countries, witnessing both progress and ongoing struggles. I am pleased to see Somalia making strides towards self-reliance, gradually breaking free from the cycle of international dependency. The resilience of its people and the determination of its leaderships to reclaim sovereignty over the development and security are commendable. At the same time, I remain deeply concerned about Yemen, a nation caught in the crossfire of hegemonic rivalries. What was once a land of great history and culture has become a battlefield for external interests, with its people bearing the brunt of war, hunger, and displacement. Yemen's suffering is a clear reminder of how conflict-affected countries too often become arenas for geopolitical contests rather than recipients of genuine support for peace and stability. How many more of our countries must suffer before the world listens? How many more? We must now ask ourselves, do we continue to wait for the world to change, or do we take charge of our own future? This is the real question. It is time to accept the painful truth. The global system led by powerful nations has failed us time and time again. But as leaders, we must also recognize our own responsibility and get our acts together. The fate of our countries does not lie in the hands of others. It lies in our own hands. We must remember to serve our people with patience, dedication, and humility. It is within this context that I firmly believe that G7 Plus has gathered enough lessons and experiences to take control of our own destiny. We can no longer afford to wait for external solutions that often fail to address our realities. Our greatest strength lies in the solidarity among our member states, a unity built on shared struggles, resilience, and the collective aspiration for peace and stability. Therefore, I would like to propose 3 key action points as our collective roadmap to transcend rhetoric and create a real lasting impact on the lives of our people. First, decades of conflict and war have left deep social, political, and societal divisions in our countries. These divides are not just a remnant of the past, they are the very cracks through which proxy wars seep in, turning our nations into battlegrounds for external interest. Unhealed wounds become the breeding ground for recurring conflicts, ensuring that the cycle of violence continues across generations. Unless we address these divisions and work towards genuine reconciliation, peace will remain fragile. Reconciliation, not as a foreign imposed agenda, but as an essential process led by those who have lived through war and understand its consequences. We have the power to do this because our actions are driven by solidarity, not political or economic self-interest. We are not here to dictate solutions, but to stand with one another as partners in peace. I call upon the United Nations to recognize and support this mission. Together, let us propose to the UN Secretary General to appoint a special envoy for the G7+, an envoy who can work alongside us to advance reconciliation, to mediate conflicts, and help end wars where they persist. This is not just a proposal, It is an urgent necessity to avoid being felt behind. If the world truly desires peace, then it must invest in dialogue and reconciliation rather than conflict management and containment. Let us take the lead in making this happen. Second, despite being labeled as fragile, our countries hold immense wisdom and experience that can inspire meaningful reforms in state building. Our struggles have made us experts in overcoming adversity, and the lessons we have learned are invaluable. I am pleased that the G7 Plus has taken this initiative to bring together practitioners from the member states to design a framework for peer learning. This framework, which was discussed in Abu Dhabi and will be discussed as part of this meeting's agenda, has the potential to become our blueprint for shaping policies, strengthening institutions, and guiding our advocacy work on the global stage. Instead of relying solely on external models that do not reflect our realities, we can use our collective knowledge to propose solutions that work for us. Now, more than ever, we must rely on our own wisdom to guide us forward. Let us embrace this opportunity to turn our shared experience into a powerful force for change, shaping the future of peace-building governance and sustainable development in our nations. Third, the international community, whether traditional donors or emerging global powers, must see us as equal partners in shared prosperity and a bridge for a more peaceful world. They must move beyond viewing fragile state as perpetual aid recipients and instead invest in our resilience. A more stable G7 Plus means fewer crises, fewer wars, and ultimately reduced needs for international aid. Instead of reacting to conflicts after they erupt, they should invest in preventing wars before they begin. The United Nations and multilateral institutions must also recognize our wisdom and incorporate our lived experiences into their policies. Fragile states are not just passive players in the international system. We have knowledge that can contribute to global peace-building efforts. Fourth and last, I urge all G7 Plus member states to mobilize political capital and invest in strengthening our collective cause. The G7 Plus was built on the foundation of solidarity, a principle that is often overlooked or even dismissed by traditional international relations experts. Unlike the alliances formed out of political convenience or strategic competition, our unity is rooted in a shared struggle for peace, stability, and self-determination. We have the potential to safeguard peace in our countries, to resist external interference, and to prevent our nation from once again becoming the battlegrounds of hegemonic rivalries. The world is increasingly divided into competing blocs, but rather than being drawn into these power struggles, we have the opportunity to form something different, a bloc for peace. We have already demonstrated that solidarity can transcend geography, politics, and history, from Africa to the Pacific, from the Middle East to Asia and Caribbean. The G7 Plus has united countries from diverse backgrounds under a single vision, that fragility is not a fate, but a challenge that can be overcome. If we strengthen our unity, we can reshape the global conversation on peace building, where others from blocs for war. We can stand as a bloc for peace, where global powers seek divisions. We can offer an example of cooperation beyond borders, where fragile states have historically been ignored or used for strategic gain. We can claim our rightful place as equal partners in shaping a just and peaceful world. Let us seize this moment, not just for ourselves, but for the generations to come. The G7 Plus can be a beacon of hope in a world increasingly defined by division. But to achieve this, we must commit, invest, and act together. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this world is becoming increasingly fragmented, with global divisions deepening and conflicts among the powerful reshaping the geopolitical landscape. As history has shown us, when great powers clash, it is the most vulnerable who suffer the most. Once again, we see wars being fought, not just on battlefields, but through economic coercion, political interference, and proxy conflicts. A platform built on solidarity, resilience, and the unwavering belief that peace is possible. I truly hope that these meetings and the discussions we hold over the next 2 days will result in a clear and decisive path forward, one that leads our nations toward lasting peace, stability, and self-reliance. I wish you all the very best in your endeavors. Let us make history together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Prime Minister of Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste and eminent person of G7+, Mambot Karala Shanana Guzmão.
Now, the evolving to 15 years, the G7 Plus journey from informal network to global actor. Presentation by Dr. Helder da Costa, General Secretary of G7 Plus.
Excellency, President of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste and Special Envoy of the G7 Plus, Dr. José Ramos Horta, Nobel Laureate. Excellency, President of the National Parliament of Timor-Leste, Dr. Fernanda Delay, and honorable members of the Parliament of Timor-Leste. Excellency, Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste and eminent person of G7 Plus, Mambot Shanana Guzmão, Excellencies, members of the Government of Timor-Leste, Excellency, Deputy Prime Minister for Social Affairs, Engineer Mariano Assanami Sabino, Excellency, Madam Chair of G7 Plus, Minister of Planning and Economic Development of Sierra Leone, Excellency, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation, Mr. Bendito Freitas, my co-host of this meeting, Excellencies, Ministers of G7 Plus member states and delegates, Her Excellency, Ms. Elizabeth Spear, Assistant Secretary General for Peace Building Support Office of the United Nations, thank you for being with us today. Excellencies, members of Diplomatic Corps, Head of UN agencies, development partners, civil society organizations, academia, private sector, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. It is my honor and privilege to stand in this podium to present to you an overview of the G7 Plus achievements over the past 15 years and outline the key challenges ahead. We have heard from our four leaders in this table, outlining the progress that G7 Plus has achieved, including the way forward. I feel emotional standing here in front of you. 15 years ago, when I was serving the former Minister of Finance, Mr. Emilia Pires, in the margin of the G7 Plus meeting here in Dili, Timor-Leste, presided over by our dear Mambot Shanana Guzmão, in the margin of the first international dialogue on peace building and state building, where Timor-Leste was the host of this important event, it was in this very podium that the representative of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mr. Armand Kasumbu, and under the leadership of Minister Olivier Kamitatu, the former Minister of Planning of DRC, he stood up here and read this landmark document of the Dili Declaration, which is a groundbreaking for the G7 Plus, including branded as fragile or failed or conflict-affected states. We are also treated as security threats because of our countries facing instability, politically, economically, and socially. We are also a passive recipient of aid. And worse, we are caught in the middle of geopolitical and geo-economic struggles between the major powers. Hence, we need a voice. That's why within the fragile states, by 2030, 1.5 billion people live in conflict-affected states, and we need a voice in this momentum. That's why the G7 Plus came into force. Next, please. Now, allow me just to bring the audience back to 2010. Let's navigate back there. Here in this building, historic building, you remember that at that time, this market was abandoned market because of the crisis of the 2006, 7, and 8. And it was under the Prime Minister, Mahmoud Shanana Guzman, that this building was rehabilitated within 53 days in preparation for the first international dialogue on peace building and state building. And right in the day one, when the big event took place where President Horta also delivered a speech at that time, Mahmoud Shanana Guzman inaugurated this venue to be the Delhi Convention Center. So this is a bit of history of Delhi Convention Center to my fellow distinguished delegates from the G7 Plus member states to know. So the G7 Plus was founded in 2010 based on solidarity and voluntarism, aimed at first amplify the voices of conflict-affected states. Never before in history that the group of 7 Plus stood side by side together with our development partners to discuss issues of development issues at the country level. I will mention this in a bit later. Second was to advocate for a new development paradigm that puts peace first, and it is nationally owned and led. That's why we call it country-owned and country-led system. We also promote peaceful means to end conflict. As you heard the Prime Minister's speech, which is very emotional, it's coming from the bottom of his heart, traveling to many countries in G7 Plus member states over the past decade to help promote peaceful means to end conflict in fellow G7 Plus member states. One of the aims of the G7 Plus we founded was to facilitate the sharing of inspiring lessons and also redefine fragility by highlighting resilience rather than fragility. Next, please. So who are the founding members of the G7 Plus? The small letter G symbolizes group, and 7 symbolizes the 7 countries that you can see on the screen, namely Afghanistan, Central African Republic, Cote d'Ivoire, Democratic Republic of Congo, Haiti, Sierra Leone, and Timor-Leste. Why these 7 countries chosen, by the way? It was in the margin of the 3rd high-level forum on aid effectives in Ghana, Accra. And I remember the former Secretary of State, the Minister of Juventude and Desporto, Mr. Nelio Isaac. At that time he was a journalist and traveling with us to cover this event. And it was in the margin of a presentation by the 2 ministers, Madam Emilia Pires and Bob Woodward from Australia, that created a lot of interest for people to be able to volunteer themselves to monitor the OECD 10 principles for engagement in fragile states. So looking around the room, those 7 countries came forward and volunteered themselves to monitor the OECD 10 principles for engagement in fragile states, and subsequently those 7 countries became the founding members of the G7 Plus. Next, please. From an advocacy group to a global force, here is our journey. Right in Delhi, 2010, when the G7 Plus was founded, a year later, after the ministerial meeting in Juba, South Sudan, we launched the landmark document of the G7 Plus family in Busan, which is called the New Deal for engagement in fragile states, which is recognized by the international community and subscribed by 45 plus countries and international organizations, including the UN, IMF, and all the other international financial institutions. Then in 2013, we coined the Fragile to Fragile Cooperation, inspired by the Global South-South Cooperation. Then in Lomé in 2014, under the ministerial meeting in Togo, we formalized the group charter. And the charter is now registered officially at the UN Treaty Division, and it's recognized as a legal entity. And it is our homework for G7 plus member states to ratify the charter, because so far we have 6 countries who ratified the charter, and the remaining are yet to be done. As our leaders explained in their speech, in 2015, in the inception of the Agenda 2030, there were a lot of discussion on SDG. And thank God, the G7 plus ambassadors in New York stood firmly and determined to defend and secure the SDG 16. That's why SDG 16 was included in the Agenda 16 of Agenda 2030. As you know, in 2015, the G7 Plus was able to join the WTO accession group. I'm pleased and proud to say that 3 years ago, 2 G7 Plus member states became officially as a member of the WTO group, namely Comoros and Timor-Leste, where President himself went to Dubai together with the President of National Parliament and the entire Ministry of Economic Development from Timor-Leste, and other members of Parliament went there to witness this historic moment. 17 years ago, ladies and gentlemen, 2 countries that also joined WTO from the G7 plus member states, Afghanistan and Liberia. And I'd like to recognize the work that is done by our ambassadors in Geneva, our former ambassador Lourdes Bessa here, previous ambassadors also contribute to the successful negotiation of G7 plus WTO accession group. And the most important milestone within our G7 plus family is the attainment of the UN observer status, where every year within the United Nations General Assembly, the G7 Plus has got a prime spot based on alphabetical order among the other intergovernmental organizations, secure a place to observe the deliberations within the United Nations General Assembly. Alongside with WTO, OECD, European Union, ASEAN, Pacific Island Forum, you name it, even African Union. So we were sitting there as a part to be able to observe the United Nations deliberations. And from 2020 onwards up to now, we are expanding our influence on climate change, as Minister of Foreign Affairs mentioned earlier on, including our call for debt relief, where President in his speech everywhere in big forum calling for abolition of debt relief faced by developing countries, in particular indebted countries, including for food security. I would like also to just highlight a few impacts in terms of redefining engagement. We've been engaging with multiple layers of partners around the world. You name it, United Nations agencies, international development think tanks, academia, private sector, international financial institutions, so that the fragile states' voice are now recognized. The latest addition was our partnership with the OECD. They are now running every year producing fragility report, which is produced after consultation with member states. With the World Bank, we also work with them to work on the conflict fragility, FCV, fragility, conflict and violence events every February or March every year. Next, please. Here are the key wins transforming advocacy into action. As I mentioned, we secure special considerations in IDA, International Development Association, The previous World Bank managed to get some assistance from the development partners towards fragile states. And when you follow the Prime Minister's early intervention, he had some experience with the World Bank president, especially with the former President Kim, which is very interesting. The other gain that G7 Plus as a group faced was gain a voice at UNGA, Munich Security Conference, another platform that G7 Plus also is now gaining traction, WTO and other key global forums. And the next win was institutionalize our fragile to fragile cooperation. I'm proud and pleased to share with the audience today that this F2F is now officially recognized by the big G7 industrialized countries in the meeting in Biarritz in France in 2019 as a framework for cooperation within the G7 Plus members. And also it's an influenced global policy frameworks, as I mentioned earlier on, with WTO, OECD, the World Bank, and other international think tanks. And the latest addition was that in Baku last year, COP29, the G7 Plus was able to influence the global policymakers, the presidencies of COP, by advocating for tailoring climate change. That's why in the video you saw a letter from the President of Sierra Leone, and that letter was publicized by more than 100 media outlets around the world. Just a couple of examples of F2F cooperation, which we call a new model of solidarity. Timor-Leste is generous enough to support the election process in Guinea-Bissau in 2013, 2014, and 2015. And I see the Minister of Estatal, Sir Tomás Cabral, who led the team to do this in Guinea-Bissau a few years ago. And also, as Prime Minister mentioned in his speech, there was a mediation, peace mediation, helping Central African Republic to restore peace process in Bangui. That's why they came up with the Bangui Peace Forum within that particular country. Back years ago, when the Ebola crisis struck some Western African countries, Timor-Leste, again, with the limitations that it had, it did show its solidarity, human solidarity, by supporting Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea in tackling Ebola crisis. And also sharing lessons in public financial management, natural resource management, and governance is now becoming the core program of the F2F cooperation, including the peer learning in election management. And I'd like to inform you also that the G7 Plus is also now involved in the election observation mission in 5 countries over the past 2 years, namely Timor-Leste, Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Solomon Islands last April. And Minister of Foreign Affairs of Solomon Islands, I deeply thank your Prime Minister for acknowledging the role of the G7 Plus in the election observation mission, and your Prime Minister quoted the humble work of the G7 Plus in his inaugural speech in the National Parliament. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me just to outline some key challenges ahead, alongside with the big grandiose vision that our leaders mentioned in the speech of President Horta and Mahmoud Shanana Guzman. As global power shifts and reduce aid, we are now looking inward. What can we do to help each other, rather than counting? As you can see, the US cuts aid everywhere. Even the UN also is suffering the pressure on this. And declining multilateralism, everyone is questioning about this. Now, what can we do? Global crisis with disproportionate impact on fragile and conflict-affected states. Rising crises and proxy wars in member states, for example, in DRC, in Yemen, in Afghanistan, which is already an ongoing, and also now in Haiti and elsewhere. And the last one is financial constraints that hinder the G7 Plus operations, with Timor-Leste sole bearing the cost. This is something that we will be discussing in a closed-door meeting of our ministerial meeting tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, the way forward. The focus of this ministerial meeting, one, is to strengthen the G7 Plus as a group, but we need more consolidation. As our group is as dispersed from Asia, Pacific, Middle East, Africa, and the Caribbean, we need to consolidate better. And also to strengthen our F2F cooperation in those key areas that we are going to discuss in our ministerial meeting today and tomorrow. And we also would like to push for inclusive global governance. And the most important one is to ensure peace-first approach remains central to our development policies. Because our G7 Plus motto is that no development without peace, no peace without development. The last one, enhancing our capacity for dialogue and reconciliation and engage with emerging donors. Finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to my secretariat team, as alluded by Mr. President and Prime Minister. The secretariat now has 3 offices, here in Dili, Timor-Leste, in Lisbon, Portugal, and last year in September we opened a new office representative in New York. This requires a lot of dedication, heavy responsibility, and humility to carry this shared vision of the G7 Plus in order to enhance visibility and impact at the global level. Thank you, my secretariat team, for your enduring work, which can be a source of inspirational to serve our member states. With that note, I end my presentation here, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, General Secretary of G7 Plus, Dr. Helder da Costa.
And now, a view from the United Nations Secretariat, G7 Plus, as a global actor. A speech by Her Excellency, Ms. Elizabeth Spear, Assistant Secretary General for Peacebuilding Support Office, Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs.
His Excellency, José Ramos Horta, President of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste and Special Envoy of the G7 Plus. His Excellency, Kai Rana Zanana Guzmão, Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste and eminent person of G7 Plus. His Excellency, Benedito dos Santos Freitas, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation, Timor-Leste. Her Excellency, Kenya Barley, Minister of Planning and Economic Development of Sierra Leone and Chair of G7 Plus. Dr. Helder da Costa, General Secretary of G7 Plus. Excellencies, Ministers, Delegates, all protocols observed. First of all, my deep gratitude to our hosts, the government and people of Timor-Leste, for their warm welcome and hospitality. Muito obrigado. It's a privilege to address this ministerial meeting, the 6th ministerial meeting of the G7 Plus, as you commemorate 15 years of progress under the banner of unity, shaping the future of peace and resilience in G7 Plus countries. I'm particularly honored to provide a further view from the UN Secretariat perspective on the G7 Plus as a global actor, following the excellent presentations of this morning and the most recent expose by Dr. Helder da Costa, General Secretary of G7 Plus, and of course building on the remarks of my leader, Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Allow me to begin by congratulating the G7 Plus on this occasion and commending the G7 Secretariat and member states for their steadfast commitment to advancing peace, resilience, and development. The United Nations recognizes the critical role that the G7 plays in amplifying the voices of fragile states, advocating for peace-first approaches, and fostering solidarity among nations facing common challenges. This year's milestone offers an opportunity to reflect on the transformative journey of the G7 Plus, and for this body and its members to chart a course for the future. As we've just heard from Secretary General Guterres, as we work to tackle global challenges for a better tomorrow, the voices of the G7 Plus will be vital. The establishment of the G7 Plus in Dili in 2010 was a pivotal moment for global development discourse. Born out of solidarity and volunteerism, the G7 Plus emerged as a response to the marginalization of fragile and conflict-affected states. As we were just reminded by Dr. Elder da Costa, these nations were often excluded from global policymaking and relegated to being passive recipients of aid. The vision that brought together the G7 Plus founding members 15 years ago, the call to give a voice to countries that were otherwise excluded, remains as relevant today as it was at that time, and possibly even more so. The current global challenges are multiple, interconnected, and profound, as we've heard from the various speakers thus far. Armed conflict surging to unprecedented levels, with 1 in 8 people regularly exposed to violent conflict last year. A proliferation of conventional and non-conventional weapons fueling the violence. A deepening climate crisis and widening inequalities within countries and among them. And more than 120 million forcibly displaced people, due primarily to conflict, but also due to climate change and environmental degradation. Progress on most sustainable development goals is either moving too slow or has regressed below the 2015 baseline. And as you know all too well, the countries affected by fragility and conflict are accounting for a growing share of global poverty, with some estimates predicting that 72% of the world's extreme poor will be in fragile states by 2030. In the UN Secretary General's policy brief, A New Agenda for Peace, which came out in July 2023, he already sounded the alarm on many of these issues. He particularly lamented the weakening solidarity among nation states, a cornerstone of G7 Plus advocacy and action. He warned of the growing trust deficit among nations and within countries themselves, including between citizens and their governments, making all of us less safe. He advocated for an embrace of the rule of law and adherence to international law, and promoted the indispensable principles of trust, solidarity, and universality. This speaks very much to the G7 Plus. Since the issuance of a new agenda for peace in 2023, as we've heard from various speakers already, geopolitical divisions and competition, as well as increased transactional approaches to foreign assistance, have only deepened. We're at a moment where, paradoxically, while we need multilateralism more than ever, it is increasingly questioned, too often undermined, and now, in the face of significant aid cuts, under tremendous strain. But as we know, these global problems and threats cannot be successfully tackled by any single country alone. This is why this ministerial meeting is so timely, and why the role of the G7 Plus is so critical. Over the past decade and a half, the G7 Plus has evolved from an advocacy group into a formidable global actor. Its achievements are numerous, as clearly spelled out by the General Secretary. The G7 Plus milestones reflect not only the persistence and the resolve of its member states to find solutions, but also their collective ability to influence global decision-making and policy frameworks. The G7 Plus has demonstrated that fragile states are not merely passive actors, but they are indispensable contributors to international peace and development. G7 Plus has also fundamentally reshaped how the world interacts with fragile states. Through initiatives such as the New Deal for Engagement in Fragile States, it has shifted the narrative from fragility to resilience. It has underscored that peace and development are inseparable, a concept that guides our work on peace building to this day. The institutionalization of fragile to fragile cooperation is another hallmark achievement. This model has facilitated peer learning and mutual assistance among member states, and has demonstrated how solidarity can drive transformative change that can benefit all. It also demonstrates that international relations can be successfully rooted in mutual support rather than a zero-sum approach. And it has also brought sustained focus and attention and assistance to a number of countries that might otherwise be forgotten or neglected, as several high-profile conflicts and contexts grab international headlines and the world's attention. I would note, as an example, the G7 Plus's considerable engagement in the Central African Republic, which I just visited several weeks ago. Despite these successes, as we've just heard, significant challenges persist for G7 and its members. These challenges underscore the need for renewed commitment from all stakeholders. The voice, advocacy, and active involvement of fragile states, which are disproportionately affected by worldwide crises, cannot be diminished in global efforts to address pressing issues such as peace, development, and climate. Excellencies, as we look ahead, it's imperative to build on the achievements of the past 15 years while addressing current and emerging challenges. Allow me to focus on 5 areas where we can work together as global actors, also building on those just identified by General Secretary Elder da Costa. First, focusing on the implementation of key political commitments. As Dr. da Costa and the UN Secretary General underscored, G7 Plus was instrumental in achieving SDG 16 in 2015. G7 member states also contributed significantly to last year's Pact for the Future, which has become the blueprint for advancing our global goals and for building a more effective and networked multilateralism. The continued advocacy and active involvement of G7 Plus countries within the UN framework and beyond it will be critical to move these issues forward to greater implementation. In this same spirit, I would also encourage G7 Plus countries to engage actively in this year's United Nations Peacebuilding Architecture Review, co-facilitated in New York headquarters by Egypt and Slovenia. This review is a key opportunity to strengthen our peacebuilding tools, including the Intergovernmental Peacebuilding Commission, and make them more fit for purpose to tackle contemporary and future challenges. Second, prioritizing national ownership and prevention. The Pact for the Future encourages member states to develop national prevention and peacebuilding strategies. Nationally owned and led prevention strategies can provide a framework for governments to identify and mitigate risks before they escalate into violence. They can be roadmaps for countries to strengthen institutions, address root causes of conflict, promote dialogue and reconciliation, and foster sustainable peace. National prevention and peacebuilding strategies can be ideal vehicles to foster greater inclusion and inclusive institutions, as called for in SDG 16. In that respect, this year is also a year to leverage the 10th anniversary of the Youth Peace and Security Agenda and the Women Peace and Security Agenda, which is marking its 25th anniversary, both agendas established by member states. This is critical, as the meaningful participation of both women and youth is indispensable for fostering peace and furthering development. The General Secretary spoke a few minutes ago of 1.5 billion people who need a voice. Indeed, the majority of those people are young people, and at least half of them are women. They certainly need to be at the decision table, and they certainly need a voice. G7 Plus could encourage the membership to consider the crafting and implementation of inclusive prevention and peacebuilding strategies and to present them at the UN Peacebuilding Commission, which offers a platform for peacebuilding accompaniment, sharing of best practices, and resource mobilization. Third, tackling the issue of development and peace financing. Global military spending has reached an all-time high of $2.4 trillion US dollars annually, dwarfing the resources available for development and representing more than 1,200 times the $2 billion allocated to peacebuilding worldwide, according to the OECD. As the Secretary General pointed out, this year's Financing for Development Conference is an opportunity for fragile states to push for action on addressing serious financial gaps and debt issues. Beyond this advocacy, it's important to keep reminding the international community that investing in prevention and addressing the root causes of conflict are cost-effective and wise investments. As global actors in peacebuilding, we can work together to demonstrate results and impact, including through collaboration via the UN's recently established Peacebuilding Impact Hub. Fourth, strengthening fragile-to-fragile and South-South and triangular cooperation. There are clear synergies between the G7 Plus and its fragile-to-fragile cooperation and the work of the UN on South-South and triangular cooperation. Within the UN, the Peacebuilding Commission is uniquely positioned to serve as a platform for South-South and triangular cooperation in peacebuilding, and further collaboration between the G7 Plus and the PBC leadership, with Germany currently as chair, could help to advance such cooperation as a tool for peacebuilding and resilience in fragile and conflict-affected countries. By leveraging the PBC's broad convening power and advisory role on the one hand, and the G7 Plus's expertise in fragile-to-fragile cooperation and its emphasis on solidarity among conflict-affected states, this partnership could further facilitate peer learning, mobilize resources, and help to reshape global peacebuilding priorities. Fifth, enhancing partnerships for peacebuilding. In order to advance our mutual goals, diverse and complementary partnerships are indispensable. Governments, civil society organizations, international and regional organizations, and community leaders all have roles to play in fostering reconciliation, addressing the root causes of conflict, and building inclusive, prosperous, and peaceful societies. As does the G7 Plus, my office, the Peacebuilding Support Office, closely engages with international financial institutions, which a new agenda for peace describes as agents for peace. We are striving to foster greater complementarity and synergies between UN support in fragile and conflict-affected contexts and that of the banks, based on nationally owned strategies. This is an area of endeavor that could benefit from greater dialogue and exchange between us. Mindful of the current financial constraints and limitations of foreign aid, we are also initiating efforts to spur peace-positive investment by private sector actors in fragile and conflict-affected countries, another area of potential dialogue and exploration. We also work to bring civil society voices to the UN to incorporate their views on global peacebuilding policies and objectives, primarily through the UN CSO Peacebuilders Dialogue, which we initiated in 2023. We would welcome participants from your own vibrant civil societies in future such events, including the next dialogue scheduled for late 2025. Excellencies, I think we all agree that there is no substitute for solidarity, international cooperation, and multilateralism, and that peace must definitely come first if we are to advance towards a prosperous and sustainable future. These common understandings between G7 Plus and the United Nations are critical touchstones for deepening our collaboration. I salute the efforts of the G7 Plus, and the countries that are members, which have shown that fragile states are not defined by their vulnerabilities, but rather by their resilience and potential for transformation. The progress that you have achieved as a united global actor over the past 15 years is a testament to what can be achieved when nations come together with generosity and a common purpose. The United Nations remains a steadfast partner with the G7+. Let us continue working and walking together towards a world where peace and development are not just aspirations, but a reality for all. Thank you. Merci. Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much, Madam Elizabeth Spear, Assistant Secretary General for Peacebuilding Support Office, Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs.
Telespectadores e ouvintes Rádio Televisão Timor-Leste, bonita companhia de a sessão ohinian, liliu a parte da dernian, to agora ita harekata discurso lubu que nebe maka apresenta ona husi entidades relevantes sira liliu com o objetivo husi encontro ministerial zige sete mais ninen nomos existência tinan sanulur sen lima zige sete mais hari li husi fatini dan unik tamane ohini ta acompanha bara kona ba processo tomak nebe maka durante zige sete mais existe liliu hodhalo
Maluxira hanesan ohini ita acompanhona encontro interministerial husinação membro G7 mais niam baloron dahulu nebe dadaune termina iha horas media hanesan ohini iha discurso primeiro-ministro nian hateten kata nação membro sira atu alcança roadmap nebe iha precisa hare fila fali roadmap nebe tawona iha plano objetivo desenvolvimento sustentável artigo nen nebe kolia konaba paz no estabilidade ba nação fragil ka nação sir nebe horas ne se mori se conflito primeiro-ministro Sanana Gusmao dehan nação sir ne tenki na cloque ba hodi adaptaan ho nação sir selu ne belehetan instabilidade política hodi desenvolve sirinya nação iha futuro nemos iha discurso primeiro-ministro husu ba representante ka husu ba representante nação ONU atu nomea enviado especial ida ba organização G7+, atu serviço ba reconciliação no hamosu no investe ia diálogo ia samada né laos resposta mais be necessária sanana de hane importante tebes atu evita de hamosu estado frágil sira ia futuro nunemos ia discurso husi secretário-geral G7 mais nian senhor Helder explica como a existência a história husi existência organização G7 mais nian nebe Timor-Leste masai hanesam fundador inspirador nomos doador ia tinan rihun rua sanulu liuba no dadaune completa ona tinan sanulu resin 5 existência organização nerasik. Além de dane, secretário-geral nos relata com a visão no missão, objetivo, roadmap, na saúde sira nebe envolve. Saída maka precisa atu hadia futuro maka precisa consolidação nebe forte. A força encontro na saúde frágil sira ba frágil, a força governo global inclusivo no garantia abordagem dame. Maluk sira ami hakara relata na fatim baita boa sira kata encontro ne se continuo encontro técnico iha hotel Spring Hotel Dili iha encontro técnico ne aban equipa técnico kana são membro de 7 mais sira se hasai declaração Dili segundo declaração Dili une bele implementa iha futuro.
We have reached the end of the first day of the 6th ministerial meeting here at the Dili Convention Center. Just to recap a little bit about the speeches that has been done by the Prime Minister, by the Secretary General of G7+, as well as the UN representative. The Prime Minister highlighted his past visits with the G7+ meetings, as well as his observations and shared messages, as well as looking towards achieving the SDG 16, which talks about the peace, justice, and strong institutions. And he also gave his heartbreaking messages about the Democratic Republic of Congo, saying how fragile states are left to stand for themselves and how powerful countries prioritize their own interest over peace and stability. His deeper concern for Yemen as well, a country override by hegemony, where people are bearing the weight of war, hunger, and displacement. And his final one is to calling upon support from the United Nations to appoint a special envoy for the G7+ to work in advanced reconciliation and to eliminate conflict and invest in dialogue. How his calling is not a proposal, but an urgent necessity to avoid being left behind. And finally, as well as to the United Nations and multilateral institutions, how they should also recognize our wishes, but incorporate to their policies. The following speech was done by the Secretary General, and to recap it, he gave a presentation about the timeline of birth of the G7+, as well as its visions, its missions, its objectives, and also the countries that are involved. And he mentioned some of the challenges and the way forward, which is what is needed is a consolidation to strengthen fragile to fragile countries, the inclusive global governance, as well as to ensure a first approach on peace. And finally, to recap the speech of the UN representative, she highlighted a few points here, talking about the support for peace and state building, the commitment to the New Deal principles, strengthening partnerships, addressing root causes for fragility, inclusivity and local ownership, global solidarity and multilateralism, and commitment to SDGs and support for transitional justice and reconciliation. Just to update to the viewers as well that this isn't the end of the ministerial meeting, but it will continue on later on for the technical meeting, which is at the Palm Springs Hotel, as well as the following meeting, which will be held tomorrow as well.
Maluksira hanesan ohinami relatan onabaita bocera katak encontro interministerial 17 mais né participa husi nação sanulure sinhat inclui mos Timor-Leste turolos nação membro hamutuk ruanulu nebe dadaun ne sayona membro 17 mais be nação neng la participa tamba questão instabilidade política no conflito nebe dadaun ne acontece ia sirania nação Maluksira objetivo husi encontro né anessa nami relata na antes baita bocira katak ida maka atu comemora tinan sanulure sin lima existência organização 17 mais né além de ida nemos atu hare fila fali saída maka alcança ona durante existência organização né no precisa atu hadia dia glitan Maluksira além de né la cleurtan Agência Tatoli mosi halo entrevista ho representante husi nação membro Sira hanesan daune nasan husi nação membro Sierra Leone nebe se for sirenia perspectiva kono ba envolvimento sirenian e a organização 17 mais no saída maka sira hakarak atu desenvolve ka hamutuk e a 17 mais
As we have mentioned before, out of the 20 countries from G7+, the 11 countries are able to participate in this meeting here today. But unfortunately, for the rest, they aren't as possible to participate because of what is been going on with their country. But we hope that for the future, as the discussions for peace and resilience proceed, that solutions can be able to be made so that these countries can be able to participate in the following meeting. And joining with me today is the chairwoman herself for G7+, representing Sierra Leone. I'm with her today to talk a little bit about what the key issues that have been discussed at the meeting today. Good morning and welcome to Timor-Leste.
Thank you, and I'm happy to be in Timor-Leste.
Just three questions here regarding the meeting. What is Sierra Leone's vision and aspirations for the future of G7+?
Well, G7 Plus has done quite a lot in the past 15 years. But if we look at our mandate, it's to expand on the mandate. And that is sharing with one another, learning from one another, and also advocating for fragile states and bringing prominence of the issue of conflict-affected and fragile states to the international agenda.
And how can Sierra Leone contribute to and learn from the G7+ in promoting peace and development?
Well, as chair of the G7 Plus for the past 10 years, we've obviously learned a lot, but at the same time we can contribute to the G7 Plus. In terms of learning, there's a diversity of countries and the root causes of conflict is different. So it's a learning experience all of the time. But in terms of contribution as well, from these experiences, we take these experiences to the Security Council, for which we are a non-permanent member of the Security Council. So we're able to also advocate at that higher level within the international architecture for the peace, conflict prevention, and also looking at conflict-affected states in a fragile states in a different manner within the international stage and agenda, and having countries recognize that we need to be treated differently, but we also have a lot to offer in terms of conflict prevention, sustainable development.
And lastly, what would Sierra Leone like to see in the future direction of the G7+?
Well, for the future direction, I would like to see an expansion of the mandate that I mentioned. I'd like to see the G7+ also as a body represented in the UN Security Council because of the experience that G7+ has had, and just play a greater role in terms of advocacy, a greater role in determining the future of our countries, and a greater role in peace within the globe.
Well, thank you so much, Minister, for sharing with us Sierra Leone's vision and commitment to the G7 Plus mission. Thank you very much.
And thank you for this interview as well with your interesting questions.
Thank you. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us. We hope this conversation has deepened your understanding of the G7 Plus and the important role countries like Sierra Leone play in promoting peace and development. Stay engaged, and until next time, thank you and goodbye.